Welcome to Transforming Work with Sophie Wade, exploring the future of work. Find out what's going on, disruptions, evolutions, opportunities, challenges, and interventions in our multi-generational distributed organizations. With a new tech and talent focus, discover what you need to know to stay upskilled and relevant and ensure your business keeps its competitive edge. Sophie investigates the promise and reality of the future of work now and as we look ahead. She interviews people who are changing work experiences and practices and shares how we can each transition smoothly and successfully to effective and more productive new ways of working.
Hi. This episode is about how the evolving marketplace and zeitgeist are impacting talent dynamics and recruiting. In particular, young candidates and employees have new deal breakers and clear desires for their working lives, with personal definitions of balance and success, and different perspectives about employers' reasonable expectations. Meanwhile, recruiters now need to hire for teamwork and enthusiasm for learning, as well as evaluating candidates' abilities to handle unpredictable and unprecedented situations. They must also build an extended network of relationships with potential candidates who may be feeling blended workforce needs, including more non-employee arrangements. I'm delighted to be speaking with Dan Smolen. Dan is the host and executive producer of the podcast What's Your Work Fit? That brings together business and workplace thought leaders, hiring managers, and career seekers to challenge the traditional notions of work and workplace, to fit who you are and what you want your lasting work and career contributions to be. Dan is also a veteran executive recruiter and marketer. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I am well, Sophie. Thank you so much for inviting me on today.
We dive right in at the beginning. And what did you study at college and why?
So I am a graduate of the Park School of Communications at Ithaca College. And I went there because it had a reputation of graduating elite talent into broadcasting. Back then it was radio and television.
So you already knew that that was your thing?
Right. So when I was in high school, it was in the wake of Watergate. And living at the time outside of Washington, D.C., the culture buzzed with anything to do with the Washington Post because they broke the story that uncovered Watergate. And so when I was in high school, I got involved in journalism and loved it. We had a great faculty advisor who allowed us to be a little subversive.
Okay.
And I really loved news writing and reporting and editing. The following year, I became co-editor-in-chief of the school paper. We were pretty good. We won some Scholastic Achievement Awards by the Columbia School of Journalism. I really thought I was going to be involved in news some way. I wanted to be a broadcaster. And ultimately, I went to Ithaca College because I visualized myself being really happy in a career in broadcast production.
Okay.
Specifically being a news producer. I love reading news. I love reporting news. And so within my first semester of being at the Park School, I got on the radio. I was a radio reporter. So that happened very, very quickly. And it was the most fun that I could ever imagine having in college because it was practical learning.
That said, after college, you go into marketing. Why did you divert towards a career other than broadcasting?
So I'll take a step back because during my junior year in college, I had a full semester internship at a program that produced local programming. It was a two-way interactive cable system called Qube, Q-U-B-E. It's famous. So Alvin Toffler, your friend Alvin Toffler, actually wrote about it. And that's how I found out about it.
Okay.
And I said to my faculty advisor, I'm reading this book, The Third Wave, and they're talking about this thing, Qube. And I'm like, how do I get an internship there? And I got an internship at Qube.
Wow.
And it was crazy fun. I was producing segments on a talk show that they had. I booked my own guests, and that was great. But the downside of it was I discovered I wasn't really a good match for not the work, but the fit check, the personalities.
Okay.
And broadcasting, it's competitive. It's very, very hard. And I'll be honest with you, I was a aggressively ambitious guy who probably pissed off a lot of people when I was there. I got back feeling a little bit unsure of my original target for a career.
Mm-hmm.
I started taking a course on advertising, and I loved it. The gentleman who taught the course was a living legend in Ithaca.
Mm-hmm.
He's no longer with us. His name was Howard Kogan. And Howard Kogan was a celebrated ad man.
Okay.
Who became a mentor to me.
Nice.
Almost like an uncle. I miss him so. But he took a deep interest in me and he said, I think you could do very well in marketing and advertising.
Okay.
In particular, I want you to get into the fastest growing aspect of the ad agency business, which then was called direct marketing.
Mm.
So really, with his direction and his guidance, I eventually got into an ad agency assignment.
Mentors are so important, helping somebody see what skills they have, particularly early talents.
So my late dad, was not in marketing and communications. He was a furniture guy. He worked as a manufacturer's rep for some very elite contemporary furniture lines, very well known.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he knew. He did not know this business that I wanted to get into.
Right.
And so because he didn't know it, he was probably a little suspicious of it.
Right.
Howard, on the other hand, knew it well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Filled me with confidence, but also grounded me to say, this is what you're going to need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
These are the skills you're going to need to develop. These are the kinds of assignments you may want to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And with that direction, I focused what ended up being a 15-year arc of my career journey.
I'm curious as to the learnings along the way and how that then morphed into moving into a completely different industry.
I look back at the years in marketing and communications and advertising, particularly working at agencies, as the land of the young and stupid.
Okay.
Because if you really thought about what you were being tasked with doing, you wouldn't do it.
Okay.
So being in the agency space as a young person who's full of feral energy, I worked really hard. I pushed really hard. I learned how to get things done,
mm-hmm.
often by myself, but of course, learning to work with other people, especially creative directors who could be really tough personalities.
Mm.
I got to work alongside some really talented people, mm-hmm. oftentimes who were nuts and would have temper tantrums or make incredibly unreasonable demands of me and my peers. By the time I was 27, I was now working in Connecticut for one of the top marketing communications agencies in the country,
mm-hmm.
a division of a major ad shop based in New York. One of my superiors said to me at the first Christmas party, Dan, are you aware that close to 13% of the revenue of this agency passes through you? And with all that, I got a big office and I got an admin. In order to keep that up, I was expected to be superhuman, Sophie. I worked sometimes up to 80 hours a week. And so I was leaving the house before dawn.
Yeah.
I learned how otherwise really nice people could turn into monsters. You're working for your own survival sometimes in a big agency. It's not easy work. It's the personalities that are often very difficult. And I never learned going in beforehand, you're going to work with some sociopaths, you know? That's work anywhere, I suppose, in a big company with a lot of big expectations. But I had to learn about that very quickly.
Why on earth then did you go into recruitment? Or did you think this is going to be so much easier because I'm not necessarily working with those people, I'm helping place them? What was the thought process?
I had some really big clients. I mean, it was a blast. I had American Cancer Society as a client. I was so proud of the work we did with them. And that sustained me too, because even if the work was difficult, you felt like you were doing something noble for the world. I eventually got downsized from one of my assignments, and I had decided I was going to try my hand at consulting, trying to start up something that could be a little bit of a tech startup that would get into more of the interactive marketing that I was doing earlier in my career. In the mid to late 1990s, the internet was still pretty young.
Yeah, sure.
Interactive marketing was pretty much in name only. Companies were collecting a lot of consumer data and doing deep level segmentation to understand key opportunities and so forth. I still felt there was something that I wanted to try to do that wasn't being done. And I had gotten familiar with interactive cable TV from Qube, but I was starting to see it get expanded a little bit. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to place a bet here that set-top marketing, what the set-top is the device you use to change your channels, that set-top marketing capabilities will be the next big wave in consumer marketing. And so I filed a U.S. patent application, which took a few years to come through, but I became an inventor. But while I was doing all that, I was a pre-operational company, and I was like, I can't sustain this. I need cash flow. I started looking for work again. Looked at some agency jobs. Nothing was clicking. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call from a woman I used to work for who had now started her own boutique recruitment company. And she called me up and she goes, would you mind coming over to my house, which was 2 towns away? That visit turned into a job pitch. And by the time I walked out the door, I had a job offer to come join her in recruitment. Her name is Victoria James. Anytime I worked with her, I made money. And so she was a great boss and a lot of fun and really, really courageous in her work. And I just loved being around her because I learned a lot. I started recruiting with her. I had my first placement within 90 days.
Nice.
And I was like, this is really fun. I worked like crazy. I mean, we were putting in 18-hour days and having so much fun. Now, mind you, this is before LinkedIn. We were doing primary research, meaning we were dialing for candidates. We had a target in mind, and we would get on the phone all day and look for people. And we ended up getting very good at presenting and placing people. And we developed a highly consultative way of presenting candidates that a lot of boutique firms were not doing.
Having done marketing, having had also the experience of broadcast and radio and interviewing people, all of these feed into then connecting with people and understanding their skills and tapping into who they are and trying to connect that with the needs of an organization who doesn't necessarily know what they really want. With many fewer resources that we have now, what were you finding that was successful in terms of understanding what clients' needs are and making it happen?
When I first started, there was no LinkedIn. So we were on the phone looking for candidates for specific jobs, and the kinds of jobs we were placing, we were very familiar with. And with Victoria being an Uber salesperson, I learned a lot about the soft things to look for. The first couple of years were, we never went to sleep. It was crazy. 9/11 happened, and we were hearing crickets. And my daughter was born 9 weeks before 9/11. And so I've got this brand new house. I got this gorgeous little baby, and I'm up at night with her at 2:00 in the morning, giving her a feeding, saying, what the hell am I going to do to make a living if this completely pancakes?
Right.
After 9/11, and for about 5 months after, I didn't place anything. I was on the phone almost being like a social worker with my clients who were mainly in New York and dealing with their own kind of PTSD, oftentimes because they would say to me, I work downtown. I saw it happen. I can't get that out of my head.
Oh, gosh.
Or one person had survivor's guilt because they were supposed to be on one of the planes.
Oh, gosh.
So
yeah,
I didn't know after 9/11 where things would go. And then suddenly we got a whole new class of opportunities.
Okay.
We got a fresh breath of air, and we were like, okay, we can keep going. But what we found then was that it wasn't enough just flooding a company with candidates to look at. What we realized then is that we have to bring our own emotional selves to this game, because our clients in some cases were suffering the emotional trauma of what they had just experienced. Or it could have gone into their work where they were struggling with a difficult workplace or a difficult boss. This is where we started seeing the human element of working with hiring managers. It informed us to be more sensitive to them. Okay. And before we got into the hard sell, which was to find out how they were doing and ask questions about their families and what's the day like for you now? Have you been able to get away? Are you sleeping better now? Things like that.
Right.
We became more humanly involved in our client engagements. And this is beyond the people that we may have known from the business that we had come from previously.
Right.
Had we not had that experience, we would not have been prepared for what would happen seemingly a year and a half later, which was the introduction of LinkedIn to the world.
Yep.
In May of 2003. We were early adopters to that, and we were like, okay, is this going to kill us? Is this thing going to render our value proposition obsolete?
Right.
But we had this experience of being, we bring more to this game than just being resume jockeys.
Yep.
Anybody can stamp their company name on the top of a resume, fax it over to the client, and say, interview this person. We had to provide a higher level of value so that what we did became an investment and not just a high cost. In 2005, I was in my 40s, and I said to myself, Sophie, why aren't I not doing this for myself? I have my ways how to do this thing differently.
Yep.
On my birthday in May 2005, I decided to go off on my own. Before I made it public, I reached out to a Rolodex of people to say, this is what I'm going to do. And I didn't announce that I was going off on my own until I had 5 of them signed up as clients. I had the revenue already in place.
Nice.
And it was glorious.
Jobs have changed so much. The skills that are required to do a job, what the employer says that they want, and what you know as a recruiter are the skills that are actually going to enable someone to be successful, because you know that that particular job is changing a lot. With that deeper understanding of people and seeing how the evolution with technology, how jobs are changing, and how industries are changing over that period of time, what were some of the things that stood out to you in terms of how your job changed, but also how recruiters within organizations were thinking about their employees differently and looking for different things in different ways?
In 2005, what was evident to me was that I had to do more, much more than I had as a recruiter done before.
Right.
I was now working with some publicly traded Fortune 500 companies, filling very difficult to fill roles. Where I discovered a new value proposition for myself, Sophie, was in stopping my client from telling me what they thought they needed.
Okay.
And just talking to me about what's a day like for you?
Okay.
What's the crap that you have to put up with?
All right.
What's keeping you up at night? It's the first time I thought of that question. You know, again, being a reporter, who, what, where, why, and how.
Right.
Talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. Where's the pain in your organization? And I'll give you a specific example where this just took off. Major financial services company based in the Midwest, Fortune 500 company. One of my friends is somebody that I had placed in there. He brought me in and he starts telling me what he needs. And I'm like, I don't know what you want. And I don't even think you know what you want.
Yep.
So tell me what you're dealing with. And what he said to me was, our internal clients are very smart people, but they're mercurial. They won't tell you what they want. They expect you to divine the answer. Tell me more what that means. And he would give me chapter and verse some of the stuff that he was putting up with. As I was hearing this, I was inventing a module for interviewing prospects. Where the questions I would ask them were based on situational dynamics. And I would say to them, okay, Sophie, I'm going to give you a situation. There is no right or wrong answer. I just want to know how you would handle this. What they didn't know is I was giving them a real life situation that my client, perhaps your future boss, is stressing over. And what happened then is that up front, that became part of the candidate's profile, their story, their unique value proposition. For the first time, I saw the value of being highly consultative. What that did was, when candidates did get brought on, it ensured that they made it past 90 days, which was for middle management, the guarantee you had to get past.
Right.
So it made me more successful. It made my client more successful because oftentimes they didn't have to wait 90 days to see how this person was going to swim if they threw him into deep water. In fact, what they could do right off the bat is, because they knew the answers to this hypothetical, was to start managing their expectations so that they would be successful. What I got from that was there was so much more beyond what the candidate was telling me in the resume.
Right.
And we knew what kind of specialized skills that they had. Oh, that's another thing that's changed. So back then, I was expected to fill in blanks so that the client didn't necessarily have to specialty train the people that I brought into their organizations as place candidates. Training was pretty rare. But what obviously has changed now is that we don't know what this person's going to need to be trained on next week.
Yes.
Right? Because of AI changing everything, the pace of project management in companies has gone from months to weeks to hours.
Yep.
So I was hiring in people that my clients didn't have to pay money for necessarily to train.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're seeing now to some degree is find me smart people who are willing to learn for the rest of their careers and be happy and thrilled about it.
And yet not every candidate is going to have the skills that you need and that enthusiasm for learning. One of the challenges is as more hiring managers and recruiters are adapting to that new reality, it's also the combination of the skill and the experience which is necessary to refine and hone that skill, whichever direction AI goes in.
I think we've kind of gone full circle over the past 50 or 60 years. In the old days, hiring managers hired really talented generalists who could do lots of different things. And then in the 80s, specialties became very important. I focused my recruitment practice on digital marketing, direct marketing, sustainability, clean tech, things like that, very specialized industries.
Right.
Now, I think that somebody who graduates with a degree in philosophy from a liberal arts college is well-read, is curious, interviews really, really well, but is really likable and wants to learn how to lead. If you show me how to get better at what I do, allow me to learn, allow me to get the training that I need as I go along, I will be there for you. There was kind of a cynical subtext that I don't want to pay for somebody's training. I want them to come out of their MBA program with all the skills that they need to manage a team of 40 people. Obviously, we're not in that world anymore.
Just looking at some new research from Upwork that said that 96% of CEOs in their study believe that AI is going to improve productivity at their company. And yet, only 26% of the companies surveyed have AI training programs. What do you think is actually going to help crest the tipping point so that companies actually do recognize that they're going to have to be investing in training, or if they're taking on people who are learning, that means that they need to be working together to move up that learning curve. But how is that going to happen?
Everything new about how to be part of a team, how to be part of a hive, that's something new. You know, when I was an executive, we were rugged individualists who survived or succeeded on our own merits, full stop. If you don't know how to work on a team now, if you don't know how to be part of something bigger than yourself, I think it's going to be very difficult ongoing. The ones that are fostering a culture of leadership, team leadership, where the youngest of the members are learning how to lead and become their own leaders in their own right. There's something really fun about working with all different disciplines and all different types of people on a crazy floating schedule that's changing by the minute in a distributed workplace. That, to me, is what is going to help all these innovations that are coming through from AI perhaps materialize in the workplace. And the laggards, of course, are going to be those big companies that get all the ink in the business pages. And eventually they will get there, because if they don't, they're not going to survive, I think.
Because teams have been of increasing importance for the last 15 years, how do you, when you're hiring, do you hire for those teams? Because collaborative work has grown 50% over the last 20 years. How do you recruit for that?
I love this question because it's something that I saw happening for the first time in 2010. And I was working with a trade association in Washington, D.C. And they don't recruit for an open assignment. They have a website. The website says, learn more about us. It's really directed towards not consumers or the type of people that would follow an NGO, but talent. What's it like to work here? And this trade association was one of the first to start engaging with potential future talent before they had an open assignment ready.
Oh, interesting.
The old way of recruiting was I put forth somebody you did not know, because typically if you're a recruiter, you're not going to put forth somebody that you do know unless you're on a retained search and you have other responsibilities beyond candidate development, what I call success management. But what this trade association would do is they would reach out to people that like the idea of working for a brand like this. This was a brand in the global environmental advocacy space. So Sophie Wade contacts them and they're like, wow, she's really interesting. Let's call her up and see if she can come in for coffee. I'd like to know more about her. And there, without the pressure of, oh, I've got to say the right thing because they're asking this question, and I've got to make sure that I'm framing the answer in a way that shapeshifts so that it's exactly what the hiring manager wants to hear.
Right.
With the guard down, sitting at a coffee table around the corner, you and the representative from this brand just talk. I mean, right. I'm really pleased that you reached out to us. So I'd like to know more about you. You know, what's a day like for you? Or if you weren't where you're currently at, what would your career look like? And so it becomes liberating. And you find out up front whether or not this person might be a good addition to the team before there is an open assignment. And oh, by the way, you're probing to see what they're interested in so that when something does come up, we already know about you. So they call up on the phone or they reach out electronically and say, we may have something that would be a good fit. Would you like to know more about it? And at that point, we already know who Sophie is. The old axiom in recruitment, which I attribute to the company Heidrick Struggles, is, can the person do the job? Number one. Well, you wouldn't be presenting a candidate if they weren't competent to do it. Would they be off the wall enthusiastic about coming in every day and performing the job? And then the third part of this is, before 90 days, are we going to be completely sick and tired of them and hate them?
Right.
By doing what this NGO did, they already knew who they were going to like and didn't like. And oftentimes that's how placements fail. We didn't see that behavior coming. We didn't know about that because we didn't ask about it first. And this is where I think recruitment, be it internal or with an external recruiter, a big company or a boutique like I ran for many years, is going to flip the tables, if you will. Maybe just have like I want to get these people on your radar, even though you don't have anything percolating. We used to do that, but we weren't really serious about it. It was just to make the phone ring. But I really think if you do that and say, these are the kinds of, I'm sending this person to you now, so don't screw me if we ever decide to place them.
Right.
But Sophie may be a really good addition to your executive team.
So it's interesting to have that approach because there's always been a lot of discussion about the extended talent pool, the blended workforce of employees and non-employees, and more use by companies in increasingly strategic roles. There's a group of people who are used, sometimes contract work, sometimes they're part-time, sometimes they're full-time, because that seems to be the mentality that you're talking about. Maybe they contract with the company and that's actually their first employment arrangement, particularly since the Great Recession. There are more younger employees in particular who are requesting to have non-employee agreements because they prefer to be consultants. They prefer to have multiple employers so they're not beholden to one and therefore they're not in such a risky environment. Have you, certainly in the more recent years when you were recruiting, seen that transition at all when somebody said, well, actually, Dan, I would rather not go into them full time. Can we explore a different arrangement?
While I was still recruiting, we used to do what I would call rent to own. If you know that business model,
sure.
If you're moving into an apartment, you don't have any furniture, so you rent the furniture, and if you like it, you pay the fee, and so you're paying up front, but eventually you've made the placement, and if you decide you want the person to work for you full time, you've already done the fit check. You know that they can work in the company, they're meeting their obligations, their goals, and so forth. that was a model I used quite a bit when either the client wasn't sure or the candidate wasn't sure.
Okay.
And it was a way of kicking the tires,
Sure.
More practical than anything.
Yeah, definitely.
This is the burning question going on right now. For I believe we are about to go into an explosion of entrepreneurism in 2025.
Okay.
Younger people, in particular, don't want to invest so much of their lives, their daily lives, in one assignment, one career. They don't want their day being the job, the commute, and the collapse, as I call it, where you go home and you fall asleep on the couch and do all that.
That's a very risky proposition when there's no loyalty from the company.
You live in New York City, and I'm very sensitive to hiring managers, and in particular, the candidates that they're bringing in from the outer boroughs or like from the eastern end of Long Island, and expect them to do the Long Island Railroad every day, which means you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to work. That's unsustainable. And for a young person, and the only place that they can afford to live is with 4 other roommates in a big apartment somewhere out in Suffolk County, they look at that and say, that's not a life. I want to have a day where I'm doing work, I'm doing things that I really enjoy, but I may want to do blended things. I got a side hustle I really care about. I want to see if that turns into something, or maybe not. That's the basis of what I am doing now, which is the sea change that, for the first time that I can recognize, talent look at the day where work is a beautiful part of it, doing other wonderful things. When work becomes this time suck that drains them of their energy, like my early career, where I was working sometimes 60, 70, 80 hours a week. My daughter doesn't want to do the mishigas that I did when I was her age.
No.
She's like, Dad, what are you, nuts?
Right.
I said, that's what we all did. That's what it meant to be successful. You had to play in pain. And she's like, no, I want to go home and play with my cats and my dog and my boyfriend. And I want to have a life. I want to do my knitting. I want to do photography. The effect of all this, Sophie, on hiring managers now, I think, is a work in progress. It's not fully evident to me how the shift in the zeitgeist is going to be reflected in how talent are hired. It is increasingly hard to get young up-and-comers to come into New York City, especially to work in the financial business for a J.P. Morgan or a Morgan Stanley or a Schwab or something like that, where they require you to be in the office when, in fact, they're, that harshes their mellow. That's not how they like to roll. It's going to create a demand driver shift where the demand obviously is we need talent coming into this company, but the driver is we're not necessarily going to get people who are going to work 80 hours a week anymore. They may come to us and say, I want to work with you as a contractor, as a 1099. I think that's going to be the big story in workplace, or at least one of them going forward. How it plays out, I am not sure.
So, Dan, you brought it up, what you're doing now. You started What's Your Work Fit as a podcast. I've been on it. Thank you very much. I'm curious as to why you wrapped up your recruiting career and started this.
Right. I've gone full circle.
You've come to where you wanted to be. Why now? And why this particular focus? We'll start there.
In 2016, I took on a client relationship that was all-consuming. It was going to be to fill 52 positions, mostly in sales and marketing. Really cool company, and they hired us because they wanted consultative people that were capable of a consultative selling process. So we got to work, and it was nonstop hiring, putting these people in place. And as November of 27 came up, they notified me, we're getting rid of everybody you just placed, and we're going to more of a rate card, because what we've discovered is this isn't rocket science.
Okay.
And having put all that work in, I wasn't putting any time into developing new business. I couldn't do it. Thought to myself, I have two possible decisions. One is I decide to stay in it and rebuild my business, or I could completely blow this up and have a Viking funeral and set the boat on fire and set it off to sea. And I decided on the latter because, that's cool.
I like that Viking funeral. Okay.
I reckoned with the fact that I was no longer happy with the state of my input into this business.
Okay.
I developed wonderful relationships with the talent that I placed. And the testament of that is that so many of them came back to me once hired with their own hiring needs to say, I only want to work with you because you really took care of me. You looked out for me. You were a mensch about this. You asked all the right questions. You prepared me well. You helped me negotiate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I got a lot of anxiety about staying in the business, and I was embarrassed because some of them left jobs they really liked to go do this thing. I had this feeling of responsibility.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it was always who was paying the fee. That's who I had to take care of. But it saddened me because I really like working with talent. I really like working with career professionals. And at that point, I said, you know what? I really want to do some podcasting.
Okay.
I had started podcasting in 2016, pretty small and dirty, but I created it as sort of a career petting zoo, if you will. Each episode, I would interview somebody who would do a job that I was filling. And we'd talk about it and what it was like to do the job. And it was part of the bigger business model as a way of maybe creating a candidate pool. But when I closed the business up, I decided I want to be behind the mic again, like I was on college radio that first semester in college. And that led to an audio podcast, which was highly produced and sounded like NPR, and I loved it. So in 2022, I stopped the audio podcast and decided I want to do a live video show, multicast show. So it would be on LinkedIn and on my YouTube channel. 2 years later, I built this show, highly interactive show where I bring on wonderful guests like you, and the audience gets to ask questions. And that's a throwback to my time at Qube Cable, where we were also doing interactive marketing and engaging with the client in novel ways. And so I knew that's what the show needed to be, but what's your work fit became the question that I now ask every guest, which is, what is it that gets you up in the morning? What makes work a wonderful part of your day doing other wonderful things and not the all-consuming time suck of a day is essentially what your work fit's about. And so now it gets to those people in the workplace, be they Gen Z or Gen Jones like me, who are, late baby boomers who are still in the workplace and maybe into their fifth act careers. It's asking the deliberate question, what makes work a wonderful part of your day? And if it's not a wonderful part of your day, what do you want it to be so it is a wonderful part of your day? And Sophie, organically, we have built an audience for that. And it's beautiful. I love it.
In the prep process, what percentage of your guests have really asked themselves that question or really thought about, to what extent am I doing something that I'm sufficiently comfortable with, or are there things that I can change or should change, or maybe the whole job? I don't know.
Well, as you know, for my guests, I asked two questions. I asked the main question that came up in pre-interview that we want to ask you. And you'll know the last question, which is what's your work fit? Everything in between is on the fly. It's just a conversation. It's not an interview. But I give that what's your work fit question weeks in advance so that you have an opportunity to explore that.
Yeah.
Nobody has answered it the same way. One person said it's flow state. I'm really into flow state. I like when everything is just sort of flowing like water, like it's like the feng shui of my work is just balanced and nourishing and whatever. One person in particular got to the fact that because he gets to call his own hours and gets to work when he needs to, it allows him to be fully present in the lives of his young children. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's beautiful. Because it's like the old Harry Chapin song, Cats in the Cradle, where it's all this regret and longing that I was never around when my kid was little, and now that I'm retired, my kid is doing what I did to him.
Right.
I get to talk to people who were like conscious of the fact that I miss so much that I care so deeply about. The mundane stuff like my daughter's dance recital, my son's swim practice, his track meet, his football game, my daughter's violin recital, the vacation that I didn't get to take to the Cascade Mountains because I got called in last minute and I had to deal with a dumpster fire. I think this goes well beyond you and me. This is the universe talking to us right now. I don't mean to go all woo-woo on you, but there is something going on right now where people are more often saying, I want this time to be meaningful. And work is a part of that.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not like I was, who was so laser focused on having an agency career so early in my career that sometimes I blotted out everything else. I don't want to miss stuff.
Yeah, I do think in these very turbulent, changing times that it's much harder to have a firm destination that you can count on. And if you can't say, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, because there is a lot of opportunity, there are many more things popping up. And as a result, it means that there's more focus on the here and now. There's more focus on what is balanced in all of this change, that I can be enjoying moments of each day because we're really not sure what's ahead. We have already had quite a fascinating learning experience to be really redefining success, being less focused on material items and more focused on experiences. And all of this goes together, being pushed by millennials and Gen Zs to be moving away from producing more things and focusing more on the here and now.
The opportunity that we have before us is to impart to workplace entrants like our children's ages, is to say to them, your success is what you make of it. Don't let others define what it means to be successful, because you know what? It's going to make you sick. When I was 23 years old and a junior executive, I looked the look, I walked the walk, I talked the talk, because when I did it, people thought he's a go-getter.
Right.
What I didn't know about doing that, surface acting to the rest of the world, is that it was eating me up inside, and the effect of it on my health was significant. I spent a lot of time on a chiropractic table getting adjusted because I had no other avenue for the stress building up in my life because I was putting on such a good performance. And that never lasts, Sophie.
Yeah.
So we owe it to our children's cohort to say, you know what? You are about to embark on a beautiful journey. You don't know where you're headed. You don't know where it's going to lead you. You don't know the milestones along the way. Don't worry. Put on a good pair of shoes, strap on your backpack, and enjoy the journey. Enjoy where it takes you. And even savor the screw-ups and the mess-ups and the learning opportunities, because without those, you're not going to end up in a beautiful place. You've got to have the learning that comes from pain and disappointment and longing in your career so that you grow as a person. Try telling that to a room full of college seniors. the amount of anxiety is palpable. I mean, it's you get these people coming up to you hyperventilating. How am I going to do it? And I'm like, you know what? Listen to what I have to say in this presentation. And if you get anything out of it, it is that your relationship with work is going to be episodic and ever-changing. People are going to come in and out of your life. Nothing's going to remain the same. The world is going to change. I mean, just look at what COVID did to this whole thing. You know, it was the opportunity we didn't know we needed, Sophie.
Dan, I love what you're saying. I love the advice for younger folks coming into the workplace and how that they can be thinking about their careers and how they can be trying to work out what their work fit is. Not what it should be, but what it is and how that evolves over time.
I would add one other thing, which is intentionally live your life so that you are making time for hobbies.
Yeah.
Photography, sports, going with your love and learning how to be a tango dancer. Living life with lots of things happening around you to inspire you. Make a point of introducing yourself to people, even if they don't introduce themselves to you. It's not always easy,
right?
But it creates serendipity. We have to learn how to get beyond our anxieties about engaging with people and be present and engaged, and maybe decide, like my wife and I do on weekends, is to side hustle a vintage clothing and antiques business.
Yes, I saw that post about that. I love it. Thank you so much, Dan, for all your insights and the great advice that you've been giving. I always have what I call immediate action tip in terms of what people can do tomorrow. It is obviously longer term advice for younger folks in terms of what they should be thinking about, how they should be thinking about their work fit. But this is the interesting and exciting journey that I think young folks are embarking on as they now have very many new opportunities in a changing world. So I really appreciate all that you've shared about their journey all along the way. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sophie. And I just want to say how much I've enjoyed getting to know you. Your scholarship in workplace and future of work has really opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I didn't know were bubbling up. And I want to thank you for opening my eyes and my heart, if you will, to really some of the wonderful things that are happening out there. I'm really excited about where our experiences in work and in workplace, whatever that means, not restricted to a domain or a venue or a time or a place of being, is going. I'm living in the most interesting time of my life right now. I love it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It really is fascinating, and it's very messy, and it's going to be messy for quite a long time.
Messy's good. Messy's good.
Messy is good, but it is also a very exciting time. And I think what's ahead when people can be determining their own path and being proactive and making different choices, having so many more options than we had, I'm really thrilled about. So yeah, loving being on this journey, and with you too. Thanks again so much to Dan Smolen, host and executive producer of the podcast, What's Your Work Fit? You can find out more about Dan and the podcast on LinkedIn and on YouTube at What's Your Work Fit 9441. You can also go to dansmolen.blueberry.net, dansmolen.blueberry.net. Immediate action tip. Your success is what you make of it. You don't know where you're headed. Don't worry. Put on a good pair of shoes, strap on your backpack, and enjoy the journey. Even savor the screw-ups, the mess-ups, and the learning opportunities. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and like it. You can also write a quick review wherever you listen. For regular video updates, curated useful articles, research, and information, follow me on LinkedIn and sign up for my Work in Progress newsletter there. Thanks for listening. Until next time.